Hi everybody. So today we're going to be completing the square, but I'm calling this part 2. So only after you've done part 1 are you going to want to do this video. And I like to split it up because it can kind of get confusing the first time you complete the square. So completing the square can be slightly harder when the coefficient of x squared is greater than 1. So yesterday when we were doing completing the square, we were looking at questions like x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. And I said make sure that x squared is 1. Make sure the coefficient in front of the x squared is 1. So it's harder if it's not. So the first thing that you're going to have to do if you want to complete the square is you must divide, and there's fill in the blanks for you, you must divide every term by the leading coefficient. Every term must be divided by the leading coefficient. That is going to ensure that x squared has that 1 in front of it, okay? So divide every term by the leading coefficient. All right, so let me show you. So here's our first example. 2x squared minus 12x minus 7, and it would say solve by completing the square. Solve by completing the square. All right, so that means the first thing we do is set it equal to 0. So 2x squared minus 12x minus 7 equals 0. All right, so now I look and I see that my coefficient in front of x squared is not 1, so it's the leading coefficient is 2, so I have to divide every term by 2. See, it ensures that it makes that x squared 1. So now I'm left with x squared minus 6x minus 7 halves. Now the unfortunate thing is that now this is probably bringing some fractions into our problem. Okay, now it's ready to make it complete the square ready. So remember, that means we have to get that 7 halves to the other side. So we're going to do x squared minus 6x. We're going to leave some room. We're going to add 7 halves to the other side. And so here's what we get. Now we're ready to complete the square. So to complete the square, remember we take half of 6, which is 3, or negative 3. We square it, which means 9. 3 squared is 9. Whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. All right, now it's going to get trickier. Okay, so then we turn our left side into the square of a binomial, which means x, it's just factored form, so x minus 3 squared. Remember, it's the square root of the first term, the square root of the last term, and the sine of the middle term. So there's that sine of the middle term. There's the square root of x squared. There's the square root of 9. All right, equals. All right, now we got to add 7 halves to 9. Now I'm going to ask you to leave them as fractions, not turn these into decimals. So 9 is actually 18 halves. And then if we add that together, we get 7 plus 18, which gives me 25 over 2. All right, so now it is ready for you to solve by taking the square root of both sides. We take the square root of both sides and we get x minus 3 equals plus or minus. Remember, this just means the square root of 25 all over the square root of 2. So that actually gives me 5 over root 2. Now remember, we can't leave a radical in the denominator, so we have to rationalize the denominator by multiplying by root 2 over root 2, which gives me 5 root 2. And root 2 times root 2 is just 2. So now over here we get 5 root 2 over 2. We add the 3 to the other side. Remember, I said put it in front. And so there's my answer. X equals 3 plus or minus 5 root 2 over 2. And yeah, it's a yucky answer, but that's totally fine for now. Hopefully I won't give you too many that look that funky, but they can look funny. That's called an exact value, okay? And it does have a value. And we're going to talk about how we could estimate that value if we wanted to, and we're also going to talk about how we would look at that in our calculator. All right, let's try one more. 3x squared minus 6x. Yours says plus 12 equals 0. I want you to change that to minus, okay? All right, so I see that x squared is not a coefficient of 1, so I'm going to divide every term by the leading coefficient. So I get x squared minus 2x minus 4 equals 0. All right, now I got to get it, complete the square. Ready? So I'm going to get that 4 to the other side. So x squared minus 2x. I'm going to leave room and add 4 to both sides. Okay, now I'm going to take half of 2, which is 1, negative 1, and square it, which gives me a positive 1. I've just created a perfect, remember that's creating a perfect square trinomial. Then I factor it, which means I'm going to get the square of a binomial. And I get x, keep the sign of the middle term, the square root of 1 is 1, and quantity squared equals 5. Now I take the square root of both sides, and I get x minus 1 equals, don't forget, plus or minus root 5. Remember, when you take the square roots of both sides, don't forget that plus minus. That's really important. I mean, really important. Really important. Don't forget that plus minus. Okay, now I'm going to add 1. I'm going to put it in front. So my answers are 1 plus root 5 and 1 minus root 5. Okay, so the last thing I want to review, we talked about it yesterday in the video, but we can use the concept of completing the square to put an equation in vertex form for graphing. It's just something that you can do if you really like vertex form. Now remember, vertex form is in the form y equals a x minus h squared plus k, where hk is my vertex. Remember, change, keep. All right, so I'm going to actually change this example. Oh, it's already changed. Okay, I just changed it on my sheet. I'm going to change it to y equals x squared minus 6x plus 12. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we're not going to set it equal to 0, because remember, when we set it equal to 0, we're solving it. We're finding the zeros, we're finding the solutions, we're finding the x-intercepts. We're just putting this in vertex form, which means we need a y and an x in our equation. So instead of bringing the 12 to the 0, we're going to bring the 12 to the other side by the y. So I get y minus 12 equals x squared minus 6x. Now we are going to complete the square over on this right side. So we take half of negative 6, which is negative 3, and we square it, which gives me positive 9. Okay. Now we're going to add 9 to both sides. Because we added it there, we have to add it on this side. So we get y minus 3 equals. Now, the right side we're going to turn into the square of a binomial. So x, keep the sign of the middle term, which is minus, square root of 9, which is 3. Now, to get it in vertex form, we want it in y equals form, so that 3 now has to get added to the other side. And so in vertex form, y is equal to x minus 3 squared plus 3. All right, so my vertex, again, is hk, so it would be, in this case, 3, 3. Now, you don't have to do that. Remember, you know how to find the vertex if it's in standard form. You can do x equals negative b over 2a, and then find y by plugging in your x. But this is just a nice way to quickly put something into vertex form should you want to. All right, so what I want you to do now, since that was a short video, I want you to go back to pages 2, 3, and 7 through 9. We're going to call this catch-up night. Okay? Pages 2 and 3 we did in class on your first day back. Many of you had a few problems that you still had left, like 1 or 2, maybe 3 problems to do. I'd go ahead and get those done. And yesterday we were working on in class 7 through 9. If you didn't finish and you want to get those done, just make sure you check your answers. Okay, and have a great night.